She was just another girl in a crowded school, blending into the background, quiet and often ignored. The teachers saw her as ordinary, someone who would never stand out. But she had something inside her that nobody could see. A secret love that made her heart race and her fingers tingle with excitement. It was the piano. She had discovered it when she was very young, sitting by the old instrument in her living room, her tiny fingers tapping the keys, making sounds that surprised even herself. She could lose herself in the music for hours, forgetting everything else, feeling like she was in a world where nothing could hurt her. School was different. Every day felt like a challenge, like walking through a minefield. Her classmates didn't understand her love for music. They laughed at her when she hummed or tried to play simple melodies during breaks. The teachers didn't help either. Some would glance at her with impatience when she struggled with math or science, whispering to each other that she wasn't talented in anything practical. She tried to ignore it, but their words sank into her heart. Each laugh, each mocking comment, made her shrink a little, retreating further into herself. One day, during music class, the teacher called her to the front to play a simple song on the school piano. She stepped up nervously, her hands shaking. As soon as her fingers touched the keys, a few wrong notes slipped out. The teacher's face twisted into a frown. "You can't even play that properly," he said loudly. "Maybe music isn't for you." The words echoed in the classroom, and the laughter from some classmates made her cheeks burn. She felt small, embarrassed, and defeated. She sat back down, trying to hide the tears that pricked her eyes. She loved the piano so much, but how could she keep trying when everyone around her thought she would never be good enough? Even at home, she had to keep her music a secret. Her parents were kind, but they didn't understand her gift. They thought her interest in the piano was just a hobby, a passing phase. They encouraged her to focus on her schoolwork, to excel in things that mattered in life. And so she practiced quietly after homework, late at night, when the house was still and the world was asleep. The old piano in the corner became her sanctuary. Each note she played was like a conversation with herself, a place where nobody could judge her, where her mistakes could be corrected without anyone noticing. The piano was more than just an instrument. It was her friend, her comfort, and her escape. She spent hours experimenting with different melodies, trying to create sounds she had only imagined in her mind. Sometimes it was frustrating when the notes didn't match her vision, but she didn't give up. Slowly, she began to understand the language of the piano, the way each key had its own voice, how different combinations could tell a story, express feelings words could not. She felt alive when she played, like the music was pouring out a part of her that nobody else could see. Back at school, the ridicule continued. Each music lesson felt like a test she could never pass. The teachers were impatient, giving up on her before she had a chance to shine. She overheard them talking in the hallways, calling her clumsy, unpromising, a dreamer who would never succeed. The words stung, but instead of stopping her, they fueled a quiet fire inside. She decided she would prove them wrong, not with anger, but with music, with the sound that only she could create. She found inspiration in the smallest things. A bird singing outside her window, the rhythm of raindrops on the roof, the hum of a car engine passing by. Everything could become a melody if she listened carefully. She began to compose little pieces in her head, memorizing them and playing them quietly on the piano at home. Her fingers grew more confident, more precise, and her sense of rhythm became almost instinctive. She could feel the music in her body, in her heartbeat, in the way she moved through the room. The more she played, the more she realized she had something special. It wasn't about impressing anyone else. It was about expressing herself, letting her emotions flow freely. She kept a notebook where she wrote down little musical ideas, sometimes sketching notes, other times just scribbling feelings she wanted the music to capture. It was a secret world, a private treasure that nobody else could touch. Despite her growing skill, fear always lingered. What if she tried again at school and failed? What if the teachers laughed even harder? She wrestled with these thoughts constantly, but each time she sat at the piano, they melted away. The music didn't judge, it didn't laugh, and it didn't disappoint. It only welcomed her, encouraged her, and gave her hope. Slowly, she began to believe that maybe one day, someone would hear her, would see what she could do, and would finally understand. Her life outside music continued as usual, with schoolwork, chores, and the occasional teasing from classmates. But inside, a secret determination was growing. She dreamed of a moment when she could share her music, when the laughter would stop and everyone would see the beauty she had carried quietly all along. The thought kept her going, gave her a reason to practice even harder, and to believe in herself when nobody else seemed to. She also started noticing things about herself that others didn't. How her hands moved across the keys, how she could play a melody from memory, how she could feel the emotion of a song in a way that made her own heart ache. These small realizations built her confidence in ways she couldn't yet show the world. Even though she was ridiculed at school, she was becoming a musician in her own right, learning the language of music that would one day leave everyone speechless. And so her days were a mix of struggle and secret triumph. In the hallways, she was quiet and overlooked, carrying the weight of laughter and doubt. But at night, in her little sanctuary with the old piano, she was free. She played not to impress, not to compete, but because it was a part of her, a part of who she really was. With each note, she built the courage that one day, she would step out from the shadows and show the world the genius they had never believed existed. Even though the teachers mocked her, and the classmates whispered, she refused to let their words define her. Every evening spent practicing was a silent rebellion, a quiet proof that talent and passion could grow even in the hardest conditions. She didn't know when the right moment would come, but she knew that when it did, she would be ready, and the music she had nurtured in secret would finally speak for itself. And that hope, fragile but fierce, was enough to keep her going, one note at a time. At home, she spent hours at the old piano, letting her fingers explore every key. The worn wooden surface had scratches and chipped edges, but to her, it was perfect. She didn't need a new piano or fancy lessons. She had the music inside her, and that was enough. Each evening became a ritual. After dinner, she would sit down, close her eyes, and let the notes flow. Sometimes she played simple tunes she had learned long ago, but mostly she created her own melodies. Each one was a reflection of her thoughts, her dreams, and the emotions she couldn't say out loud. At first, she was careful, playing quietly so nobody would hear. Her parents would be reading in the living room or watching the television, and she didn't want to disturb them. But as she grew more confident, the music grew louder, stronger, and more daring. She experimented with rhythms and chords, learning how to make the piano sing in ways that felt natural but also magical. Each night brought new discoveries, small moments of joy, and the thrill of creating something no one else had ever heard before. She began to memorize complex pieces, not from books, but by listening and copying sounds she found beautiful. She listened to recordings secretly, trying to capture the essence of the music and then make it her own. It wasn't easy. Some songs were fast and complicated, and she would stumble over the keys, frustrated. But she refused to give up. Mistakes didn't scare her. They taught her. Each wrong note became a lesson, guiding her fingers to find the right path, shaping her into a musician who could listen, adapt, and create on the spot. Her imagination was her greatest tool. She would imagine playing for thousands of people, each note filling a vast concert hall. In her mind, the audience was captivated, completely silent, listening to every detail of her performance. She felt a shiver of excitement as she imagined the applause and the way music could touch people's hearts. This vision kept her motivated, even when reality was harsh, when school was a place of ridicule and the teachers seemed blind to her potential. Some nights, she stayed up so late that the stars outside her window were the only light left in the sky. The quiet of the night made her feel connected to the world in a way she couldn't explain. She felt as if the music itself was alive, listening to her, encouraging her, and giving her strength. She began to understand that talent wasn't something you needed validation for. It was something you felt, something that lived inside you, waiting to be expressed. Her secret practice sessions became more ambitious. She challenged herself to play songs that were far beyond her current skill level. At first, it was nearly impossible. Her fingers would hesitate, hitting wrong keys, creating jumbled sounds. But she noticed something. Her mind could imagine the perfect melody, even when her hands struggled to follow. Slowly, her hands caught up to her imagination, and the melodies began to sound beautiful and complete. This progress filled her with pride and gave her hope that one day, she could perform without fear. She also started to notice how music could mirror her feelings. When she was sad, her melodies were soft and lingering, almost like whispers. When she was happy, the notes danced quickly and lightly, bouncing from key to key. Anger and frustration poured out in powerful, crashing chords. Music became her way of understanding herself, a language she could speak when words failed. It gave her a sense of control over her emotions, a way to channel everything she felt into something tangible and meaningful. Despite her progress, fear was never far away. She worried constantly about what would happen if anyone discovered her secret talent. The memory of the teachers mocking her in class haunted her. She didn't want to be laughed at again or worse, ignored. So she practiced quietly, always careful, always hidden. But at the same time, there was a growing excitement inside her. She sensed that something was coming, a moment when she could finally show her true self. And that anticipation made her practice even harder, even more passionately. Every new piece she learned, every melody she composed, added to her confidence. She started noticing small improvements in her technique, how her fingers moved with more precision, how she could play faster without mistakes, and how she could express emotion through every note. She was no longer just playing music. She was communicating, telling stories without words, sharing a part of her soul that nobody else had seen. It was a secret power, one she was nurturing with care and dedication. Sometimes she would imagine the reactions of her teachers and classmates. She pictured their faces, wide with shock, when they heard what she could do. The thought made her smile quietly, but she didn't let it distract her from the work. She knew the real challenge was not just to surprise others, but to become the best musician she could be, to be proud of herself even if nobody else ever noticed. That mindset kept her disciplined and focused. As weeks turned into months, she began to create her own unique style. She mixed the pieces she had learned with the melodies she invented, blending them into something original and expressive. Sometimes she stayed up so late that she would fall asleep at the piano, her head resting on the keys, dreaming of music even as she slept. Her parents sometimes found her like that in the morning, and though they were puzzled, they never scolded her. They sensed that she had found something important, even if they couldn't fully understand it. One evening, she discovered a new technique by accident. While trying to play a complicated piece, she pressed 2 keys at once in a way that created a harmony she had never imagined. She paused, listened carefully, and realized it sounded beautiful. She spent hours exploring this new sound, experimenting with variations and learning how to make it work with different melodies. Each discovery like this filled her with wonder and excitement, making her feel that the possibilities with music were endless. The piano had become her closest friend. It listened without judgment, supported her without conditions, and responded to her every emotion. She began to understand that true talent wasn't about being recognized by others. It was about the connection she had with her music and the joy it brought her. And yet, the thought of sharing it, of performing for others, lingered in the back of her mind. She imagined standing on a stage, the lights shining, and the audience holding their breath as she played. The thought was terrifying, but thrilling at the same time. She kept journals of her musical ideas, sketches of melodies, and notes about techniques she wanted to try. Each entry was a step toward her dream, a record of her growth and progress. Looking back at her old compositions, she could see how far she had come, and it gave her confidence that one day, she could surprise everyone with her hidden talent. The mockery of teachers and classmates didn't matter in her private world. She was building something powerful and beautiful that belonged entirely to her. At school, she remained quiet, keeping her secret hidden. She smiled politely when teased and endured the mockery silently, knowing that her real strength was not yet visible. She noticed other students who were also overlooked or underestimated, and she felt a sense of connection with them. Sometimes, she imagined how music could help them express themselves, just as it did for her. The idea made her dream bigger and fueled her determination to continue practicing, no matter how long it took. Her evenings were filled with music, exploration, and discovery. She pushed herself to learn faster, to play more complicated pieces, and to understand the emotions behind each song. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge to a world where she could be herself, a world where talent and creativity were valued, and where her inner voice could be heard. Each night, as she played, she felt a little braver, a little stronger, and a little closer to the moment when she could step out of the shadows and show the world the musician she had become. And so, she continued, hour after hour, night after night, nurturing her hidden genius. She didn't know when or how it would be revealed, but she trusted that one day, the music she had poured her heart into would speak for her. Every note, every melody, every harmony she discovered was a promise to herself that her time would come, and when it did, the world would finally hear the talent that had been quietly growing in secret all along. One day, the school announced a music recital, a chance for students to perform for their classmates, teachers, and parents. When she heard the news, a mix of excitement and fear ran through her. She had spent so many nights practicing in secret, and now the thought of performing in front of an audience made her heart race. The memory of past ridicule lingered, and she worried that she might be laughed at again. Yet, deep inside, there was a spark of hope. This could be her moment to finally show what she could do. She signed up quietly, not telling anyone. The other students were already talking about the recital, boasting about what they would play and how perfect they would sound. She remained silent, listening to their conversations and keeping her own plans to herself. She knew that her music was different. She didn't want to compete or prove herself against anyone else. She simply wanted to share the melodies she had nurtured for so long, to let the piano speak for her in a way words never could. The days leading up to the recital were filled with nervous anticipation. She practiced more than ever, playing her chosen pieces over and over again. Her fingers knew the notes, but her heart still trembled at the thought of performing. She imagined the classroom filled with people, their eyes fixed on her, and for a moment, the fear almost stopped her. But she pushed it aside. She reminded herself of the nights she had spent alone, learning, creating, and growing. If she could face the quiet hours of practice alone, she could face an audience too. Finally, the day arrived. She wore simple clothes, nothing fancy, blending in with the crowd of students and parents. Her heart pounded in her chest as she waited for her turn. One by one, the other students performed. Some were good, others struggled, but all the attention made her more nervous. She watched the audience, noting the smiles, the polite applause, and the occasional bored expressions. The moment to play was drawing closer, and she felt a mixture of excitement and dread. When her name was called, she took a deep breath and walked to the piano. The room fell quiet. All eyes were on her, and for a brief moment, she froze. Her mind raced with doubts. What if she made a mistake? What if they laughed at her? But then she looked at the piano, her old friend, and felt a wave of calm wash over her. The keys were familiar, comforting, and ready to tell the stories she had kept hidden for so long. Her fingers touched the keys gently, testing the sound, feeling the resonance, and then she began to play. The first few notes were soft, careful, almost hesitant. The audience listened, some with curiosity, others with polite interest. But as she continued, something changed. Her confidence grew with every note. Her hands moved with precision, and the melodies she had crafted over countless nights flowed effortlessly. She played with emotion, letting the music express everything she had felt, everything she had kept inside. The classroom seemed to fade away, leaving only her and the piano, and the music filled the space with a power that could not be ignored. Her performance included both pieces she had learned and her own compositions. Each melody told a story, each chord expressed a feeling. The audience, initially quiet and skeptical, began to notice something extraordinary. The music was not just notes on a scale. It was alive. It was full of passion, depth, and emotion. The teachers who had mocked her in the past sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were hearing. The classmates who had laughed at her before now leaned forward, captivated by the sounds pouring from her fingers. As she played, she lost herself completely. The fear, the nervousness, the memories of ridicule, they all disappeared. In their place was pure joy, the exhilaration of sharing her gift for the first time. She could feel the energy of the room, the way the music moved through the audience, touching hearts and drawing attention. Each note seemed to soar, each melody carried a story, and by the time she reached the final chord, the silence in the room was almost unbearable. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the last note to fall. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned quiet. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, it was soft, polite, but it quickly grew louder and more enthusiastic. People were cheering, clapping, and smiling, amazed at the performance they had just witnessed. The teachers who had once doubted her now looked at her with astonishment and respect. Some had tears in their eyes, realizing the depth of her talent and the years of hidden practice that had led to this moment. She stood up, slightly trembling, and gave a small bow. Her heart was racing, not from fear, but from exhilaration. For the first time, she felt truly seen. The laughter, the mockery, and the doubt that had followed her for so long seemed to vanish, replaced by recognition, admiration, and awe. She had faced her fears and discovered that her music had the power to touch others in ways she had only dreamed of. After the recital, people came up to her to praise her performance. Some teachers apologized for underestimating her, and classmates congratulated her with wide-eyed amazement. She smiled politely, feeling a sense of pride and validation that she had never known before. But even more important than the recognition was the knowledge that she had shared a part of herself, a part that had been hidden for so long, and it had been heard and appreciated. The experience changed her. She no longer saw herself as a quiet, overlooked girl in school. She realized that her talent, nurtured in secret and refined through endless practice, was something extraordinary. She began to dream bigger, imagining performing in larger halls, sharing her music with even more people. The fear of ridicule still lingered occasionally, but it was no longer paralyzing. She had faced it, and in doing so, she discovered her true strength. Back home, she reflected on the recital, replaying the performance in her mind. She remembered the initial hesitation, the growing confidence, and the joy of playing each note. She realized that the real victory was not just the applause, but the journey. The nights of practice, the struggles, the secret melodies she had created, and the courage it had taken to step onto the stage. Each note she played had been a small act of bravery, and now she understood that her music could be a force for change, a way to express herself and inspire others. In the days that followed, the memory of the recital lingered. Teachers spoke to her differently, with newfound respect, and classmates looked at her with admiration. But more importantly, she carried a sense of confidence and self-belief that could not be shaken. She continued to practice at home, refining her skills, experimenting with new techniques, and composing even more complex melodies. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge between her inner world and the outside, a way to share her emotions, her creativity, and her story. She also began to notice other students who struggled quietly, who were overlooked or underestimated. She felt a sense of empathy for them, knowing how it felt to be doubted and mocked. She imagined how music could help them express themselves, just as it had helped her. This realization inspired her to continue not just for herself, but for the power her music could have in the lives of others. The recital had been a turning point. It was the first time her hidden genius had been revealed, and it left everyone who heard it speechless. She had proven that passion, dedication, and perseverance could overcome ridicule and doubt. More than that, she had discovered the joy of sharing her gift, of connecting with others through music, and of being seen for who she truly was. The memory of that moment, the feeling of the music filling the room, and the look of amazement on the faces of those who had doubted her became a source of inspiration that she carried with her into every practice, every composition, and every future performance. After the first recital, word about her talent spread quickly. People who had once doubted her were now whispering in amazement, trying to understand how a quiet, overlooked girl could play so beautifully. The teachers who had mocked her in the past avoided direct confrontation, but their looks now held surprise, respect, and even a touch of guilt. She herself was still learning to believe in her abilities fully. The applause and admiration from that day had opened a door, but she knew that the real test was still ahead. Another music competition was announced at the school, this time with a larger audience and even some local musicians invited as judges. Many students were nervous and practiced diligently, hoping to impress. She, too, signed up, feeling both excitement and trepidation. The thought of performing in front of more people, including those she had always admired from afar, made her heart race. Yet, unlike before, she wasn't paralyzed by fear. She had experienced the joy of performing, and she knew that her music had the power to reach people. Her preparation for the competition was intense. She spent long hours experimenting with her compositions, combining pieces she had learned with original melodies she had created. She worked on dynamics, expression, and timing, making sure that every note would convey the emotion she felt inside. She even practiced playing with her eyes closed, trusting her fingers and intuition to guide her. Each evening, the piano became her sanctuary once again, a place where she could prepare without judgment, perfecting her performance piece until it felt effortless. The day of the competition arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Students, parents, teachers, and local musicians filled the room, the chatter and anticipation creating a hum of energy. She waited backstage, her hands slightly trembling, but this time it was not fear. It was excitement, the thrill of sharing her music on a bigger stage. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the melodies she would play and the story she wanted to tell through her piano. The moment was almost surreal, and she felt a surge of determination. She was ready. When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage with calm confidence. The room fell silent, all eyes on her, and for the first few notes, there was polite attention. Then something magical happened. As her fingers danced across the keys, the music filled the hall with depth, passion, and nuance. The compositions she had practiced for months came alive, revealing the full scope of her talent. Every note, every chord progression, every pause carried emotion and storytelling. The audience, initially quiet and attentive, became utterly captivated, hanging on to every sound. Teachers who had once doubted her now watched with wide-eyed astonishment. Some couldn't believe what they were hearing. The quiet girl they had overlooked was performing with a mastery they had never imagined. The local musicians, who were experts in their field, exchanged impressed glances, clearly recognizing her skill and creativity. Even her classmates, who had teased her before, were stunned. The ridicule of the past seemed meaningless in the face of the brilliance they were witnessing. As she continued, the music grew more complex and expressive. She had included sections that she had never dared to play publicly before, fast passages that required dexterity and precision, harmonies that demanded careful control, and melodies that conveyed deep, nuanced emotion. She played with her entire being, her face and posture reflecting the intensity of the music. Each note seemed to float through the air, connecting with the listeners on a level beyond mere sound, touching hearts and leaving them speechless. The audience could feel the emotion in her performance. People leaned forward, captivated by the storytelling embedded in her music. Some closed their eyes, allowing the sound to wash over them. Even those who had been skeptical or indifferent were now fully engaged, caught in the spell of her talent. There were moments of quiet tension, followed by breathtaking crescendos that made the room vibrate with awe. The recital was no longer just a performance. It was an experience, an emotional journey that transported everyone who heard it. When she reached the final notes, the silence in the room was profound. It was a collective holding of breath, a pause in time as the last vibrations faded. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started as a murmur, then grew into a roar, with clapping, cheers, and even some who stood to honor her talent. She felt a rush of exhilaration and relief, mixed with pride and validation. Her music had spoken louder than words, and the world had finally heard it. Teachers approached her after the performance, offering apologies for their earlier judgments and praising her dedication and skill. Classmates surrounded her, expressing awe and admiration, eager to hear about her journey and the countless hours she had spent practicing in secret. Local musicians who had attended the event offered encouragement, some even suggesting she pursue formal training or public performances beyond the school. For the first time, she truly felt the recognition she deserved, and it was overwhelming yet exhilarating. Backstage, she took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. She reflected on her journey, the ridicule, the long nights of secret practice, the doubts she had fought to overcome, and realized how far she had come. Every challenge, every tear, every moment of self-doubt had shaped her into the musician she had become. The music she had nurtured in private had finally found its voice, and the experience left her with a newfound confidence and a sense of purpose. She also began to notice the impact her music had on others. Teachers who had once dismissed her were now inspired by her talent, realizing the importance of recognizing and encouraging hidden potential. Classmates who had laughed at her were motivated to take their own interests seriously, seeing that dedication and passion could yield extraordinary results. Even younger students looked at her as an example of what was possible when one pursued a dream relentlessly. She understood that her music had the power to inspire, to teach, and to change perceptions, and that realization filled her with pride. After the competition, she returned home, exhausted but joyful. She sat at her piano in the quiet of her room, replaying the performance in her mind and reliving the emotions of the audience. She felt a deep connection to the instrument, knowing that it had been her companion through every struggle and triumph. The piano was no longer just a secret friend. It was a bridge between her inner world and the wider world, a channel through which her voice and her talent could reach others. Her confidence continued to grow as she practiced, experimenting with new compositions and techniques. She realized that she no longer played solely for herself. She played to express, to share, and to inspire. The fear of ridicule that had once held her back was gone, replaced by determination and a sense of responsibility to her music. Each practice session became a celebration of her growth, her creativity, and the joy of making others feel something through sound. She began to dream bigger, no longer confined to the walls of her school or the limited audience of local recitals. She imagined performing on larger stages, sharing her compositions with people she had never met, and touching hearts far beyond her own community. She knew the journey would not be easy, but the exhilaration of the last performance had shown her that dedication, passion, and persistence could overcome any obstacle. She was ready for the challenges ahead. The experience had taught her more than just how to play the piano. It had shown her the power of perseverance, the importance of believing in oneself, and the impact that hidden talent could have when finally revealed. She knew that many others might face ridicule or doubt, and she hoped that her story could serve as an example that brilliance often lies in unexpected places. The journey was still ongoing, but she had crossed a threshold, moving from hidden genius to a recognized talent whose music could leave everyone speechless. And so, she continued her journey, fueled by the memory of that unforgettable performance, the applause that echoed in her heart, and the realization that she had discovered something truly remarkable within herself. The teachers who had mocked her were no longer a threat. Their disbelief had been replaced by awe. The classmates who had laughed were now witnesses to her brilliance. She had faced ridicule, embraced her talent, and transformed it into something extraordinary. Every note she played was a testament to her courage, her passion, and the hidden genius that had finally, undeniably, been revealed. After her remarkable performance at the competition, life began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. Teachers approached her with respect, no longer doubting her abilities. Some even sought her guidance for understanding music, admitting that they had underestimated her talent before. Her classmates, who once teased her, began to see her in a new light, asking questions, complimenting her skills, and showing curiosity about her journey. She didn't hold any resentment. Instead, she felt grateful that her perseverance had finally been recognized. She realized that her journey had the power not only to change her life but also to inspire those around her. At home, her parents noticed a difference in her demeanor. She was more confident, carrying herself with a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. They began to understand how serious she was about her music, supporting her with encouragement and praise. Her evenings were still filled with long hours at the piano, but now there was a sense of shared pride. Her family listened to her compositions, asking questions and marveling at the complexity and emotion embedded in every note. The piano, which had once been a secret, had now become a symbol of her dedication, talent, and hard-earned success. Opportunities began to appear. Invitations to perform at local events, small concerts, and school gatherings allowed her to share her music with larger audiences. Each performance further strengthened her confidence and refined her skills. She learned how to connect with audiences, how to convey emotions through subtle nuances in her playing, and how to embrace the nerves that came with performing. Every stage, every set of applauding hands, reminded her of how far she had come from the quiet girl who had once been mocked in classrooms. She also started to compose her own music more seriously, blending classical techniques with the melodies she had discovered in her imagination. Each new piece was an exploration, a reflection of her experiences, feelings, and dreams. Some were joyful, others contemplative, and a few were bold and daring, revealing the full spectrum of her creativity. She began sharing her compositions with friends, family, and teachers, receiving feedback and encouragement that fueled her desire to improve even more. Music had become not just a passion, but a calling. Her story began to spread beyond the school. People who had witnessed her talent shared the news with friends, neighbors, and even local newspapers. She became a quiet source of inspiration for other students who had been overlooked or doubted, showing that dedication and passion could overcome ridicule and skepticism. Young musicians looked up to her, seeing proof that hidden talent could flourish if nurtured and believed in. She found joy not only in performing but also in encouraging others to pursue their own gifts, understanding firsthand how empowering recognition could be. Despite her growing fame, she remained humble. She never forgot the early days of secret practice, the moments of self-doubt, and the nights when her piano was her only companion. Those memories grounded her, reminding her of the importance of perseverance and self-belief. She continued to practice diligently, always seeking to improve and expand her abilities. She explored new techniques, experimented with different styles, and challenged herself with more complex pieces. Her dedication was unwavering, driven not by the desire for fame, but by the love of music and the joy of sharing it. The teachers who had once ridiculed her now expressed admiration and sometimes even asked her to perform during school events to inspire other students. She welcomed these requests, seeing them as opportunities to encourage others to embrace their own talents, no matter how overlooked they might feel. Her journey became a living lesson that resilience, hard work, and belief in oneself could overcome skepticism, mockery, and doubt. She became a quiet mentor, showing through action rather than words that talent and passion could shine despite any obstacles. Her classmates, who had once laughed at her, became her supporters. Some even joined her in small musical collaborations, learning from her technique and creativity. She discovered that by sharing her music, she could build connections and friendships that were stronger than any judgment or ridicule. The laughter and teasing of the past seemed distant and irrelevant, replaced by mutual respect and shared enthusiasm for the arts. She realized that true recognition did not come from silencing critics, but from continuing to grow, improve, and express oneself authentically. With each performance, she noticed the emotional impact of her music. Parents, teachers, and students would approach her, sharing how her compositions moved them, brought back memories, or inspired them to pursue their own passions. She understood that music had a unique power to connect people, to communicate feelings that words often could not. This realization deepened her commitment to her art and reminded her why she had endured ridicule and self-doubt in the first place. Her gift was not just for her own satisfaction. It had the ability to touch hearts and inspire others. As she looked toward the future, she began to set larger goals. She imagined performing on professional stages, composing music that could be heard by thousands, and perhaps even teaching others to discover and develop their own talents. She saw the potential to make a lasting impact, using her music to encourage, uplift, and connect with people in ways that transcended everyday life. The girl who had once been mocked for her dreams now embraced the idea that she could reach beyond her small world and make a meaningful difference through her art. She continued to practice diligently, finding joy in the process as much as in the outcomes. Every evening at the piano was a chance to explore new melodies, refine old compositions, and push herself to greater heights. She experimented with rhythms, harmonies, and emotional expressions, continually learning and growing as a musician. Her dedication inspired those around her, showing that persistence and passion could overcome challenges and lead to extraordinary achievements. The piano had become not just an instrument, but a lifelong companion, a source of comfort, inspiration, and fulfillment. Through all of this, she never lost sight of the lessons she had learned along the way. The ridicule of her teachers, the laughter of classmates, and the doubt she had once felt were all part of her journey. They had shaped her resilience, deepened her understanding of herself, and strengthened her determination to pursue her dreams. She understood that challenges were not obstacles to be feared, but opportunities to grow, learn, and ultimately triumph. Her journey had become a testament to the power of perseverance, self-belief, and the courage to follow one's passion. Her story inspired not only those in her immediate environment but also a wider audience. Friends, relatives, and community members shared her journey, highlighting the remarkable transformation from a mocked student to a recognized musician. She became a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated. Her example showed that hidden talents could flourish when nurtured with dedication, and that recognition often came not from immediate approval but from persistent effort and unwavering belief in oneself. As time passed, she continued to evolve as a musician, taking on new challenges, exploring different styles, and performing in increasingly larger venues. Each experience added depth to her artistry, refining her ability to communicate through music. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that mastery required patience, dedication, and continuous growth. Yet, she also knew that the foundation of her success lay in the years of secret practice, the love of music, and the determination to prove, above all, to herself that her talent was real. In the end, she realized that her journey was about more than recognition or applause. It was about embracing her passion, overcoming doubt, and using her gift to connect with others. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her voice. Through it, she had discovered her own strength, resilience, and creativity. She had transformed ridicule into triumph, doubt into confidence, and a hidden talent into a powerful expression of herself. Her story was a reminder that passion, persistence, and belief in oneself could lead to extraordinary accomplishments, and that even the quietest, overlooked individuals could leave a lasting mark on the world.